able, you, you'll be able to understand what is on the causal pathway of a phenomena as compared to something that is just an observation. And then you can target your interventions towards the real causes of the situation. And then so that you produce good results. And that's all what research is about. So when you are writing for grants or you're writing a research applications, anybody reviewing your application, they want to see this connection that you have studied a lot about the cause and there's a lot of gaps of knowledge in there that you want to expose. And maybe there's also gaps in terms of the causal pathway towards the effect. And you are saying to the person, because of this uncertainty or blurred picture or lack of understanding, this is why I want to answer this question so that we can now start to attack the problem where it hurts. And this is, to me, over a number of years, has culminated that that's the essence of doing research. And so proposal writing is central to this process. A lousy proposal will give you a lousy result. And I can give you a life example now. The Food and Drug Administration of the US told us that 95% of the studies on COVID that they approved for different drugs that people said work, we want to try this and that, 95% of those studies were non-informative. It means that billions of US dollars went down the drain. But we were in a pandemic, so people are in a panic. They want a solution. So you can go with badly designed studies because you don't know, maybe the answer lies there. And somebody says, I already have 20 million or $2 billion for this, let's go. You go, as long as it's ethically done, you go. But the issue is now, in a retrograde, we see that we lost lots of money, such that a good study design is required to be part of our real life situations. So in writing a good proposal, you also are looking at how you're going to design your study, which I'm going to touch on a little bit. But let me start with because it's really not rocket science, but unfortunately, it's something that a lot of people struggle with if they haven't done their homework really well. So what I call the essentials of attracting grants is what I'm going to talk to you about now. And I have a few slides. I usually go through them very fast, but if you have any questions, you could bring them to me towards the end. So I'm looking for a share thing here. All right, so are you able to see my slides now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Sometimes when I do this, they start to freeze, but let me try. Okay. So basically, if you really want to do anything in life, it has to be just basically about life principles. So it's not about just science. It's about, you know, what really works in the world. So good research or proposal writing starts with self-realization. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then on the other side, there are funders who have their principles And you have to synchronize that so that their interests and your interests match. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you engage the funders, and then finishing off on how you ensure excellence and integrity, and also the importance of finding a mentor always, just like in any other business. So the question of how you know the area is really important. If you are somebody who just wants to try this and that, you're going to have a very hard time excelling in grant application or proposal writing, because you'll be somebody who will be just shooting in the dark most of the time, and it's not going to be a fruitful exercise. So asking yourself, how well do you know the area or the scientific area, is a basic question which you need to answer first before you even take the pen and put it against paper to start writing things. If you don't have enough information, is the time, or enough knowledge, is the time to do something more about it. Because you really need to have in-depth knowledge about the subject. You need to have academic experience. You need to have previous research applications experience, and sometimes demonstrate it through publications that you have had attached to your work. And you need to show that you have worked with research teams that know what is happening, that know the research area well. And there you have memberships which you can show off, and you will see that any research application or grant proposal will have these sections that I've just highlighted here in different format or in different order, but they will require you to show them that you have knowledge about the subject, experience, and a track record. And that track record, it can be proven, and that you can be searched. Nowadays, you search everyone on the internet or in databases, and that you are affiliated to teams that can make a difference. Because nowadays, working in isolation is a non-starter. And then the issue of knowing funders is really important, because, as I will explain later, funders are constituted by humans like us. There's a lot of human emotion also around there. It's not just a building that you see, okay, there's an NIH, that is Wellcome Trust. There are people there, and they are put behind certain values and goals. And it's really important to understand the funder you're targeting. And you see, if you're in a multidisciplinary team, the funder you target for one proposal will be completely different with the funder that you're going to target with another. Why? Because they have different core principles, and they have different core values. It's very important to understand who is behind the agenda setting. And if you have, because this is important, again, I emphasize about human faces. This is important. Things that you read on the internet, or you read published documents by these funders, they have no human face. And sometimes you can get lost and you don't have an alternative explanation until you meet a person. So you really need to understand who is behind the agenda, who are the people, and find a way to talk to them. Most funder websites don't even give contact details, because nowadays it's against the POPIA. But once you have gotten that information, it's really valuable when you have someone inside the organization that you can talk to. Of course, going to your websites is also still important. But here is a picture that I was referring to. If you look at what types of research we have in the world, they are in different categories. So you have funders that are interested in research itself. There are funders that are interested in dissemination of results or research that others have done. And there are funders that are interested in the uptake of the knowledge and the results, and others are interested in the implementation. And so this also is a guide for you of where you should target, what you should do, what capacities you need to bring on board in building your research teams, etc., etc. So you really need to ask yourself, you really need to ask yourself questions as you're going along the way. Have I done enough? Sorry?
No, continue. You were frozen at some point in time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So you really need, as you go along, you're writing your good proposal. Now I call it a good proposal because I assume you have taken everything into account. But you continue asking yourself questions. How much engagement have I done with the funders or its networks or its members on the board? Many funders have got members on its board or stakeholders group. And sometimes the way to get good engagement with these funders as you are writing your proposals around getting funding is also to look for opportunities to be on the review boards or committees of these funders. And usually this information is available on the funders' websites, but people ignore it. And they think it's not me, but you can imagine if you are shortlisted and you are a commit member of some sort at CDC or NIH or Wellcome Trust, how much information you will be able to get vis-a-vis somebody who is not on the committee. Again, I emphasize on humanity, and people also forget this, that the people doing this sometimes they want, to get rewarded as people who are doing a good job. They need compliments or not just complaints all the time. And you as a grant seeker need to develop this habit of knowing who to contact in that institution that issues grant. And if you know them or they don't know you, you introduce yourself. I am such. I'm a medical student. I've been doing very well in college with my professors, but they have been getting grants from you, which has helped me to get where I am. I just want to thank you and express my interest in this area in case you have future opportunities. And somebody who is really human will keep that information somewhere, and they'll remember that one day there was a student who contacted me about this, and it doesn't happen every day in a year. But when I was doing my hard work, it made my day during that month. I was happy that somebody is appreciating what I'm doing somewhere out there. And that's how you can sometimes make a mark. Now, it is very important to cultivate the culture of excellence and integrity, because writing, research, it's really about pursuing excellence. And if you're reckless, it shows from the beginning of your sentence or whatever you populate on that online form, that this is not the person that we can put human life in whose hands we can put human life. And people completely lose interest as before they even read half of what we have written. So funders work with institutions and people who strive for excellence. That is what you need to really also invest in doing and learning in your culture of writing grant applications and proposals. What is also important is not to work alone. And you really need to find a mentor. And mentoring is difficult to define in many settings, because sometimes it depends on the culture of the environment, the people, and what they look at in terms of what we can call mentoring. So I grew up when I was when I was young. I grew up watching kung fu movies of Bruce Lee, and there's a movie where he's talking about a master and a youngster how to pay respects to the master, because if he doesn't do that, then he cannot learn the knowledge that master has. You can tell that that kind of relationship work as well as mentorship in that kind of setting, and it may not work well somewhere else, like in Malawi or maybe United States or whatever. So, but in general, there are stages in what we call true mentoring, and these are the ones that I have tried to highlight here. That it has to be a stage where you have partnered with somebody, obviously, who has gone through what you want to also experience and has enough experience and is willing to oversee your excellence, but is not going to tell you what to do, because it has to be your choice of what life path you want to take. But you set the expectations together and establish a foundation of understanding that they know where you want to go, and they also maybe have been there, and and then they say, okay, I think here we can work together. Then you agree on the expectations, because this is, again, you have, I think that the easiest word to kind of always compare is a supervisor and a mentor. They are completely different, and people confuse these things. So here you can see that if you have a supervisor, for example, it could be somebody who has just been allocated to you by the university or the college or the course coordinator. That's not a mentor, because the choice of pairing is artificially done. But here we're talking about something that you approach each other and then you negotiate. Yes, I think I can be. At the back of it is always the principle that everyone is doing it for for the benefit of the mentee and not of the benefit of anybody else. If they are doing it on the benefit of the college or the university, that's not mentorship. If they are doing it on the benefit of the professor who is doing it, that's not mentorship. It has to always be for the benefit of the mentee. And when you agree on the expectations, then you set the working agreements. And quite often nowadays, the mentorship in universities is a signed agreement. After you agree, you find a mentor and things, then you can go and say, now we agree that we can work together, and you sign on the agreement. And also, when you're parting, it has to be free. It shouldn't cause any conflicts at all. But the main thing is that you work together towards accomplishing the learning goals, and then there has to be a closure to the mentorship, that you agree that on a certain date, I will say I have done my part, and unless you want us to continue and your goals have changed and you want to go through the cycle again. So this is essential in any other business, as it is essential as it is in commercial setting. Every CEO will tell you they couldn't have gotten there if they couldn't have gotten a good mentor. It is also essential in science. And you can tell when you read proposals of people that have written, you can tell who has gotten through good mentorship very easily. So that is what I wanted to share with you for now. I don't know whether there are any questions or comments or additions. corrections, whatever. This is your turn now. I stop here. Thank you.
Feel free to ask questions to Dr. Nyirenda. He's still here with us. And then, yeah. Are there questions? Comments?
Like the presentation was about just attracting research grants. Like if we have no experience or like no how do we kind of like it's because that's like the first part, right? We have to have no full feel like we haven't seen.
Adriano didn't get the question clearly because there's interference. If you could repeat it, please, for me.
Yeah.
Now there was an echo, sorry. Do you want to write it in the chat so that I can see it properly?
Okay, type speak to. It's too bad. Okay, you come and ask here.
Yeah,
And then you don't get it, I will like it.
well, you don't have to use them.
So is it muted? No, it's okay. So I was wondering, like, if we don't have any experience, or like if we feel like we don't have enough, like, previous, like,
Yeah,
we feel
I
like
can
we
see.
don't have enough. Yeah, hello. Yeah, but if we feel like we don't have a lot of research experience, or you know, like we're not familiar with a subject, but we would like to pursue a research grant, how would we go about that?
No, that's a very
Sorry.
no, that's very clear. No, thanks very much for that question. It is very pertinent now because there's a lot of people who are interested in doing research, but they don't have that much experience. And this is where it is important to align yourself with a team that is very experienced and competitive, because it is a competitive area and the best teams get the best rewards. So really you need to find yourself and embed yourself in a team that is, firstly, it has to be a career path that you have chosen to do. It's going to be really demotivating if you just go into some research team and they are a team that are doing subjects in science, but are just off your map. You know, it's not gonna work. But it has to be alignment with the teams that are appealing yourself, sort of like, you know, they are doing something that you feel, this is my life purpose, I can do with this. Because when you join them, your enthusiasm and your absorption of the processes, it's going to be automatic and enjoyable. So that is what I think I would really advocate for. Nowadays, it is very, very seldom that a researcher would be successful from their bedroom by themselves. When I was studying, we used to have people like that. And some of them are the ones that taught me medicine. There'll be a brilliant researcher who just gets grants by himself. Of course, there'll be small grants. They will not be as huge as billions or millions of dollars, but there'll be important grants. But there will be maybe just a professor at the college, sometimes being assisted by their wife, and he writes a proposal by himself on a computer. he submits them, he gets the money, and then he goes to college and starts recruiting students, and then they go. That has died down now because really there's no individualism. It's about building teams, because you need to have teams that are very strong to help you answer very complex questions. So in a research site, you will have epidemiologists, statisticians, then you have genomic people, you have, specialized doctors, and then you have social scientists, you have people who have expertise in community mobilization, etc., etc. And that is what is more attractive to successful, but not just successful, but efficient way to funders of spending their money. They would rather put their money where it's not just going to be wasted, and also cause more complications that would be very difficult to deal with at a later stage. So I don't know whether that answers your question.
No, it does. I think I understand a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you will see that maybe some of you, when we're talking about proposal writing, you were thinking that I'll project some form of a form and then start telling you when you reach at this stage, this is how you complete it, and things like that. In this art of grant writing, proposal writing, pursuing research, that's just completing an application form. It's just less than 1% of the process. Most of the processes are about what I'm telling you about building teams, knowing what the shortfalls of that team are, and building the capacities that are required, and consolidating those teams. And when I say teams, it doesn't mean it has to be 100 people. It could be 3 people, 2 people, but it's still a team that can take things forward in that manner. And now when you come to those issues that I talked about how do you relate to the funders, it could be one member of your team, that their job is just to look on the websites of funders, get the contacts that are required, establish that rapport, that, of presence of where they are, while the other teams, their expertise will be actually into doing literature review, going into the literature, getting the background of the results to justify that the team understands the background of the problem, and that's why they're interested in the process of producing a solution. And then there will be another team that will be completely doing other things like budgeting. I can tell you there's so many applications that are good, that are thrown away just based on bad budgeting. Everything else is fantastic, but when it comes to budgeting, the funders look at what they've put on the paper and they think, my goodness, this is just not what we can spend money on. This is poor financial management, poor thought about what needs to be costed well, and then it gets thrown out. So this is where the world is at the moment. So I wouldn't waste your time by showing you application forms and doing that, because even there, all agencies have different application forms, because as I said, they have different needs, they have different values, they have different emphasis, and all different forms of different funders don't mean anything. But it's the principle of building yourself into a researcher that can write appealing proposal that is more important. So that's the point I was trying to emphasize. Now, the next thing is about study designs, because one of the issues that you will be judged when you write your study applications is how thoughtful you are in trying to answer a question with the best method so that you produce the best evidence. Because the user is only interested in the evidence. Does it work or it doesn't? Or are we doing things right or we're doing things wrong? Or were we right or we can be proved wrong? So all they want is the evidence. But coming to that evidence is always methodical because of what we know. I studied with Bradford Hill philosophy. What we know on the cause and effect, for example, is that there are so many things that happen on the way. And these 10 principles that you read in Bradford Hill will now start to show you why there are certain things are emphasized in your study design. I can give you a basic example of malaria. For those of you who speak Spanish, Portuguese, or French, you will understand that the word malaria is composed of two words. The first word is mal, M-A-L, which in French is bad, and aria, which in French, Italian will translate, or Spanish will translate air. So this disease called bad air, which we call malaria, the history is that in the old days, it was a disease that was attacking people that were working in wetlands, marshy areas, and people had the inference that these people who are having a fever, sweating, vomiting, and dying, it's because they are working so hard in areas that have got toxic gas or bad air. And so it became bad air disease. And it stuck with us for now. And for those populations, that was a cause. But they did not know what lies in that causal pathway. But immediately, because of the effect, they made an explanation. And that is, in those days, was right. But now we know that there are other things on the causal pathway that led to somebody who worked in those areas to have a fever, sweating, and death. And it's because there were also insects around there called mosquitoes that were biting the people, and which was normal life to them, but transmitting these germs and then causing malaria, and then they died. Even the idea that a mosquito really transmits malaria had to go through the same exploration. So it was Dr. Ross, who was an Indian-born British scientist in India, who showed that I have caught the mosquitoes and I found in their salivary glands certain differences, and they have parasites, and I think these are the ones that are causing malaria. But people did not understand that. And this happens all the time in life, all the time. It's because we are humans. When we see something happening, we try to explain it and we give it a short reason based on our observation. So you can use a lot of thoughts, try to use them as an intervention, but they are not evidence. For you to produce evidence, you need to, within your grant writing skills, you need to understand how studies are designed based on the problem you're seeing in front of you and the effect that you want to produce. If you understand that, it's very easy wherever you'll be going, because you will know why you have to do epidemiology, why you have to do statistics, and why you have to do social sciences, why you have to do that, because they all are tools that make you understand the issues on this causal pathway of disease and an agent of some sort. So let me quickly also share my screen. So study design is very complex, and it's still getting more complex in our era, because there are so many issues that are coming into play, and the diseases are getting more complex, and the kind of solution and its impact and how quick you want to get them there is also getting very complex. But in general, I'm just going to quickly go through the well-known study designs. I'm not sure you're going to use all of them in your life, but depending on what you would choose to do in your life, you may find that you will realize, okay, this is what Tom was talking about. So in terms of studies that we know produce evidence for the effect that we want to measure, there are two types. There's one type that is called non-experimental research design, and the other one is experimental research design. So if we go through the experimental research design, you'll find that these are mostly for research that you are trying to find an intervention, for example. You like, Mr. Trump says, oh, chloroquine or jik for kitchen use can cure COVID. And you say, okay, we want to prove that. And then you go into an experimental mode, because this is something that has never been introduced in humans. And so when you're doing those trials, you can choose whether you want your sampling unit to be individuals, or it can be communities, for example. So that is the only difference, because I can say, okay, in this example that I've given you, then I'll give apple juice or orange juice to these cities, New York, Washington, and that, and then far away from there, Seattle, then we will have an experimental arm, and then I'm going to use jig for washing the kitchen if it really works. And then you have other methods of trying to remove bias and that. And that would be community trial, because we're at analysis level. You don't get bogged down to see what has happened at an individual level. The outcome will be at a community level. So you'll be saying, okay, in Seattle, 20 out of 100 clinics did better. They had better outcomes as compared to the New York ones, because we only had 1 out of 10 clinics that produced good results. That is different when you are using an individual level randomized control trial, which is based on individual outcome. So there you start talking of real patients in a study that you have included, and then you randomize them. Some have got to be randomized using a product that works, and the other one may be a fake product, which we call a placebo. And you start what you call blinding and all this kind of stuff, because that's how you reduce bias, and etc. etc. So that's one arm. So a lot of COVID trials were mostly experimental, because we were using new drugs or vaccines that are just coming out. But there are other studies that we call non-experimental, and these are observational studies. And these are also divided into population and individual. And many of you have heard the phrase, for example, people saying, I like red wine with my meal because it's good for the heart. So, but if you look at the evidence for that, it was not experimental. Nobody was given red wine and then another group given something that tastes like red wine and is made into red liquid, but it's different. Never. Those studies never happened. All those observations are population-based because people think, okay, these areas that people drink red wine, there's less heart disease compared to those who don't drink. And now they start to generalize that is the evidence you have. That is on the non-experimental side now, and at a population level. But you can also do it at an individual level. When you do that kind of comparison at an individual level, using the same example of red wine, you say, I want to see whether the individuals, not populations, but individuals who are regularly taking red wine indeed have a lower risk of developing heart disease. Then you go into the households, you advertise for your study, and then you recruit people who take wine, red wine, with their meal. Once you find those, then we call them cases. In this case, they are not disease, but still, because it's a study, they're called cases. So you have 10,000 cases in your city that take wine, but you need what we call controls. You need people of the same characteristics that were born almost in similar years as your cases. They have a similar lifestyle, similar education level, as many factors as possible, the same, except the difference you assume will be the drinking of wine. And then you follow them over time. Either you follow them over time and you see how many in each group develop heart disease, so you can dispute your hypothesis that no, we were wrong. The heart disease doesn't really differ after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. That is called a cohort study. But if you go backwards, you go to their houses and then you find these 10,000 people who drink red wine with their meal, and then you look for the controls, and then you say, okay, now can you show us your hospital records? If you have been to the doctor in the last 12 months or so, can I see your hospital records so I can see what it shows in there? Then you can say, okay, in the people that drink wine, when I went in their records, I see that there was 50% of them that visited a doctor with a complaint that it could be similar to a heart problem, as compared to people who did not drink, they did not see a doctor. So you're going backwards. That is called a case control study. You are doing it in a similar manner, and each one has disadvantages or advantages, you can tell, because the one that you're going backwards, you're not following the people. The people, you're just using the follow-up, the safe follow-up records that people have up to this point that you are studying them. But the other one, the cohort study, you are following up the people yourselves. And there are these cohort studies, for example, in Europe or the United States, which were designed for example, in the 40s or in the 50s, and those families are still being followed up, and maybe the doctors who designed those studies are no longer there, they have retired or they've died, but the methodology still continues such that you can say the 100-year follow-up of people who have certain characteristics that were interested in is ABC. So that is the advantage of a cohort study, that you can actually, follow up people. But if it's a rare disease, then it will take you 1,000 years. That's the other disadvantage. You need to find a disease that is very common so that you can have good ratios in your maths to have statistically significant results. But those are just technicalities. But if you want to know about the studies, that is basically what you will be choosing from when you are writing your study design. And you have to convince the reader who is scrutinizing your thoughts why you chose that method. In other words, you need to know the advantages and disadvantages of each type. This is what proposal writing and grant writing is all about for you to understand at this stage, without going into too much detail about each study. So that's the importance. And if you can learn more about this and specialize to be, this is my area, I'm going to a study team so that I can help them design studies. There's lots of epidemiologists and statisticians that make a very good career out of that. They themselves don't touch the patients. They will just, be experts in designing studies to the effect that the researcher wants. Yeah, and then again, that's just those are just technicalities that I have. If you want to see these slides, which tells you what to do when, and how they are different. Studies are differently done in different settings. Those are the technicalities. But just to say that when I said these studies are becoming more complex at the moment, is that it is also very ethically very challenging to do certain studies that you could have done 50 years ago because of the ethics issue. For example, nowadays, it is possible, and we hear that it's possible, to cure diseases like sickle cell or even HIV by gene editing. So you edit the genes of the sufferer to eliminate the genetic components that constitute the disease. In modern ethics, that's like fetal studies, because you are changing the genetic makeup of the person. And those are ethical issues that the bodies that protect human rights, the dignity and freedom of choice, will always defend the patient whether that is really the best thing they should go through, unless they particularly choose by themselves that it's fine, it should be done. But at a population level, populations need to be protected. And we can talk more about ethics. And I was privileged just two days ago. It was when I said I was in Europe, I went to Nuremberg. And in Nuremberg is a very central place for research ethics because of the history of the Nazi trials. So the tribunal of a lawyer chosen by the American government, the Attorney General, who led the team of British, Russian, French lawyers to set up this Nuremberg tribunal and tried the Nazi practitioners. It was very clear that from that point on, it is not going to be acceptable to subject a human being to any experimental work unless it is something that is out of the ordinary. So issues like that are making the conduct of studies very complex, such that the picture that I showed you, it's a simple picture, but you find that for you to design a certain type of study now it could be basically impossible because of ethical grounds. The science will tell you that could be the best approach to produce the results, but the human ethics tells you that is going back to the Nazi area. You can't do that, then you don't have to do it. And that's the way it is nowadays, because we're living in a changed world, which is probably much better. So if you ask what should the best study design be guided by, I would say it should be guided by the research question and what measure of effect you want to demonstrate. So if you want to show, for example, a proof of principle, which means that you want to show that something indeed works, but has never been shown to work, your study design will be completely different if you are now trying to compare the efficacy of that thing to already existing intervention. And cost starts to become an issue because there are certain study designs, it would be great to do them, but you spend 5 times more the money, and it doesn't justify the human suffering that you can take those billions just because some professors are so interested and thinking, yes, this is the first time we can do this and we can try design, let's do it. No. There will be other more compelling issues that we tell the gatekeepers that you can't do that. I'm sorry. And again, the issue of impact. What is it that you want to be an impact after you found the results starts to play a significant role. For example, if you want, for example, to do a study in a population that is affected by a very severe disease, but it's rare, and it needs a lot of money and billions of dollars to do, it may be that indeed for the sufferers, that's the best thing that can happen. But it's a rare disease that only affects 1 in 500,000, 1 in a million people. The question would be, it's a fantastic study design. It shows that it's well thought through. It can produce the accurate results, but what would be the impact at a community level? The impact is not going to be something that is going to generally improve the living standard of the masses, etc., etc. And then the community starts to look at its own from inside, and this is where ethics committees come on board, and they say, we will not approve this study in our setting because we have other pressing problems. But the research is fantastic. The team behind it are fantastic. We know them. They have done this before in other diseases. We know Professor so-and-so, we know this and that. We know they can produce, but in our area, no. This is very important. And so if you want to do a research, then you need to go back to the research design and redesign the study to answer the same question, but in a more acceptable way, in a more socially acceptable way, in a more geopolitically acceptable way. So all these issues start to come in place. Of course, as I said, that most of what I've said also relates to the availability of the resources and the money to do the research. I already talked about avoiding working in silos and bringing in a lot of teams. This helps to improve the study design in a way that you can never think about, because there are certain things that, in my experience, have been forgotten just because a team did not have a sociologist or a social scientist on board on time. But they were just excited that this is a fantastic study. So there were mathematicians in the study. There were some geneticists that were looking at fascinating technology now that we can use. This is a chance. And they do the study, but they go so far in front, and then they have a result, then it becomes difficult. And we saw this during COVID, although it was during a pandemic. No matter how fantastic the BioNTech technology was, no matter how fantastic the Moderna technology was, no matter how fantastic the scientists behind the design of these studies were, at the end of it, the people said, we don't know these products, we were not involved, we don't know the constituents that you have added in them, we're not going to take these vaccines. So again, it's not just about knowing how to design a fantastic study. You have to know what is going to come for it to become more impactful. Lastly, I say don't underestimate the feasibility of implementing a study. It looks simple on paper, but when you go into the field, it's always a challenge. And you have seen how Malawi is, and Adriano and team, Nestle and others, they'll tell you their experience. When we design these things in the office, the real work is in the field, because that's where the battlefield is, where what we design is going for test drive. And always keep in mind to coming back. All these things you can change in a study. You can revisit and reformulate. So you always need to ask yourself pertinent questions, some of which I've listed there. Now, I've talked about the institutional review boards. In the United States, you have the Department of Human Protections that accredits all the research ethics committees or boards around the continent. In Africa, we don't have that. So each country has its own system. So in Malawi, we have the National Health Sciences Research Committee. That is like our National Ethics Board, and another committee at the Kamuzu University of Health Sciences. But these committees are very important, and you can't do research nowadays past them in the back door, because it is a criminal offense. So the committee should confirm the determination that the potential benefits of what you're doing is balanced by or outweighs the potential risks and burdens, as well as social and scientific value for participants and society. So the other point for this is that you can decide that at the end of the day, you don't want to be in a lab, you don't want to go in the field. Your contribution in research is to become an ethics member. It's also something that is very appreciable. I talk here about some of the ethical regulations, their backgrounds. I think this you can read for yourself when you get the slides. Only to say that in my 20 years in the business of clinical trials, I have seen even this area changing. So now, after COVID, we are talking about how to do research better in vulnerable populations, because this has become to the fore. Even what we did during COVID, some of it was unethical. Researchers were forbidden to go into ICU to see the most pertinent patients that could provide a solution that we were looking for. They were barred from doing that. It's only attending physicians and the nurses that were allowed. That is being questioned. Was that ethical? And we also have seen a lot of this research sometimes being done on populations that are under human conflict. For example, now, it's very easy to go in some place in Ukraine just because people are under war, and then you do a study there because you are providing some shelter and things like that. Is that ethical? Those are people who are vulnerable populations. The same happens here in Africa. You go and do studies on people who live happily in the bush, like in the Amazon. We have them here. People who don't understand why you're coming there. They think you're there just to have fun with them, but you talk about research, they have no clue what you're talking about. Is that ethical? So this is a really important area because it's evolving. And as the world changes, everything changes. Our thinking about what human rights should be also are changing. For example, now, a quick example is how now the world is going towards valuing a LGBTQ community. It's very easy for people to go in a community and say, we are doing a study on women, osteoporosis and things, but people who have defined themselves as women, you have to give them a good explanation why they should be excluded the study, because somebody says, now, yeah, I was born a man, but I've been chosen, now I'm living as a woman, I should be in that study. So all those kind of issues that are new are all part of ethics. And you as a researcher need to be very attentive to them, because the impact on your study, whether it's successful or not, whether it's impactful or not, depends on these small ethical studies, ethical issues. So in Malawi, when we apply for ethical approval, which you will do through your team, you're working with the CRIMS, the ethics review board will go through your study, and usually they review it and they send comments of their observations. And usually those comments address areas you need to change or improve in your study. Now, what if an ethics committee asks you to change the study to the way that it starts to look non-scientific? What do you do? Because then you're not going to meet your scientific endpoint. Your causes, your effects of the cause you have introduced as a study are going to be marred. You're not going to produce the results you want. What do you do? That's where it becomes challenging. And you need people who have good skills in your team to put responses together in a nice way without offensive, because most of the ethics people are not scientists like yourself. Some of them are volunteers, they are clergymen, they are a police officer, they are a judge who didn't go through science school. They have to also understand your point of view, that the reason you suggested this is because you want to find a solution for the people, and you can together help each other to streamline this. So this is an important part of it, and it is as scientific as a mathematical modeling exercise that somebody can do a PhD on and be a member of a study team. This ethical component, in as simple as it looks, is also as intricate as that and needs due attention. So, again, thank you very much. Let me stop there. I hope the story connects well enough in your mind on what you need to, how you need to prepare yourself to write a grant or application or a study proposal, into thinking about the study design that will produce the impact, the effect, and the evidence that you want, and how you can get there, and how you can marry all these issues with societal needs of the society we live in today, the post-Nazis life of human rights, inclusion. and etc. etc. Be happy to take any questions as well. But those were the two issues or chats that I thought I should have with you today, and my day will end here.
Guys, questions for the two presentations that have been made, especially the second presentation on research methodologies. Do you have questions? Okay, Dr. Nyirenda, so there are no questions on this end. It might be that people are happy and they have understood everything.
Good.
We are happy, right? Yeah, so let's give him another hand of applause and
No, thanks very much. Really, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I would have really wished that I was with you, but I'm sure most of you, we will be in touch somehow over emails, and some of you we may meet somewhere elsewhere in this very interesting work. When you go back, please remember that you have a place in Malawi. If you choose a career that you can do in a place like Malawi, we'll be happy to know about it. And if we can contribute a little effort to your achieving that, we will also be very happy. Thanks very much.
thank you, Dr. Nyirenda, and have a good evening.
Good evening to you. Enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.